Hi, welcome back to another episode of Team Jingya Coffee Talk. Today we also have Antito, who's a tax specialist, and then we also have An Nguyen, who's a tax attorney, but also a specialist in bankruptcy as well as eviction as well. Welcome back to our episode. Antito,
I am.
What do you have for us today?
I know, right? Special guest, special day. Anyways, yeah, thanks for allowing me to join you and also, make an introduction. Many of you have known Luxian for many years. If you haven't, that's the same guy. He just gained like 20 pounds. But, 10 years ago we.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I think I shared that last episode that we, we did a lot of community work. 10 years ago, we did seminars and clinics during the time when the recession happened, and we used the community center as our, forum or location where we reach out to the community. Everything was done free. Everything was done for the benefit of our community. 10 years later, we're a lot more successful. Obviously, a lot more. I have a lot more responsibilities as a parent now, but I'm just so excited, for Luxian to be here to reach out and educate and really share with us perspective and insight to what's going on with the community in terms of the whole topic of law and bankruptcy, right? 'Cause I think that's been a hot topic lately. So.
Thank you for that, Antito. So, Luxian, usually what type of recent case do you get recently with COVID, whatnot, and just the economy in general right now?
Well, I'm seeing a lot. Bankruptcy has actually slowed down if you take a look back pre-pandemic numbers. Okay. But the reason is because there's been so many programs out there that's been given from the government to to help people through the pandemic. So all these foreclosures have been on hold. There's been memorandums on evictions. There's government assistant who that's helping with people with rent. So we haven't seen the numbers we saw before, but it's slowly starting to pick up again. We're starting to see business bankruptcies, a lot of businesses that went bankrupt during the pandemic, things like that.
Wow. So, what do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's a great point. I think just like what I think we talked about in the last episode was how COVID changed me, right? I'm sure it changed you physically and emotionally and just the way we feel about life, right? And so we forget guess what? Life still goes on and responsibilities are still on the client. So now no longer stimulus, no longer freebies, no longer defers and delays. Right now, the judge is like, dude, you guys gotta pay, submit your paperwork. If you can't handle the bills, you can't file this, you can't do that. So I think that's really what you're talking about, right?
Right. A lot of people, lost their job during the pandemic. Those numbers are, still there. A lot of these people haven't found jobs again, and you see the homeless numbers increasing. If you drive anywhere around the city, you see homeless encampments everywhere, and I think those numbers are just going to increase. Governments, they just haven't done enough to help people who've lost their job and the homeless. So.
Wow.
Right. Well, I think we talked about the social aspect of what we do. It's just kind of sad, right? We try and help as many people as possible. There are laws and avenues and channels you can use to get you back on your feet. But frankly, it just seemed like a lot of people, and we're not talking about the homeless and transients, so that kind of opiates and some other issues, right?
But mental issues and stuff like that is also a factor out there.
Exactly. So there are people who want to get back on their feet within the standard of what the law allows, and I think that's where the bankruptcies 13 or 10. I'm hoping you can share with us, 13 versus 7. What as a financial advisor, sometimes when I think bankruptcy, I'm like, damn, you're giving up on life or whatever, right? But I've learned, through our relationship, through learning from you, that sometimes it's a fresh start. Sometimes it might not necessarily be something as debilitating or embarrassing or anything like that, but it's just a way to say, hey, under the law, it allows me to kind of create a new system, a new plan for me to get back on my feet, based on my circumstances, based on whether it's a business, personal asset that I have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's a moral stigma with filing bankruptcy. A lot of people don't want to go that route because if they applied for that debt, they borrowed that money, they want to make an effort to pay that money. But the bankruptcy code's there to give people a fresh start. A lot of time it's not necessarily reckless spending that causes bankruptcy.
Right.
It's a loss of job, it's medical, it's divorce, it's a business that collapsed, things like that. And you want to get in there and get advice before it's too late, right? Because a lot of people I saw back in the first recession, 2008, 2009, when the housing bubble collapsed, they resorted to going into all their retirements, and they were basically draining their retirements to try to keep this business alive or try to pay these credit card bills. And at the end of it, their retirement was gone. But bankruptcy protects 100% of your retirement. They don't want you to use that retirement. That's why you're able to file bankruptcy, keep your retirement, and get a fresh start. There's debts that you're able to wipe off with a bankruptcy, and there's debts that aren't dischargeable in bankruptcy. Tax, for instance, right? Tax has a special rule as far as discharge. You have to fall under that rule to get that tax discharge. They have to be at least 3 years old, and they have to be filed, and you have to have made an effort to pay those taxes during those years. Chapter 7 is, when you think about bankruptcy, most people probably think about Chapter 7, right? It's basically a liquidation. You disclose all your assets, you disclose all your debts. You have to qualify for a Chapter 7. Not everyone can file a Chapter 7. They look at a state median for a Chapter 7. If you're over that, you can't file. You'd have to file a Chapter 13 and not a Chapter 7. And what a Chapter 13 is it's a repayment plan. You're going into a payment plan to pay a portion of your debts back, depending on how much income you have. So the more income you have, the more you're going to end up paying back. The less income you have, the less you'll have to pay back. But that's the big difference between a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13.
Right. No, I've learned that a lot, the hard way, because I think of it as so narrow, right? But obviously the bankruptcy law is a lot more nuances, a lot more tricky, right? Require planning, require some strategy involved. Just because you're like, hey, I owe money, I should go see attorney on, and he'll fix it.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances, and especially when we're talking about exemptions, which allows you to keep certain assets. If you file bankruptcy and you don't know those exemptions, you could possibly lose your house, and they could force a sale of your house, and they'll pay you back what you're allowed to exempt. But at that point, there's no point in stopping the trustees from moving with the sale of the house and using that the funds recovered from the sale to pay off your creditors.
Wow.
So I don't recommend anybody filing bankruptcy themselves. It's just you can go down a road where you can't recover from if you make mistakes in your petition.
Right, and I think when you're in such dire situation as far as owing so much money, credit card bills and all that. I mean, really, are we trying to save $1 or $2 trying to do your own bankruptcy? Right. And then again, we're talking about, literally almost 20 years of experience now, right? That we've been doing this. And it's so great when you mention about the tax debt being able to clear in bankruptcy. That's really my area of expertise in terms of trying to work with IRS, trying to get installment plans or OIC. But now having some some
a different path.
Yeah, like value and just be able to literally go next door and say, hey, what about this tax debt that this client of mine has that's been over 3 years and they're current, but yet just not getting anywhere, right? So that whole legal, tax, financial are interconnected.
And you know how hard it is to work with the IRS and tax board. So
that's on the other episode.
Yes, but taxes are just one of those things in a bankruptcy that has its own set of rules because you're dealing with the government debt. But a lot of people don't know that they are dischargeable in bankruptcy under certain rules. But if you have tax debts, that's one of those things where I wouldn't recommend you file your own case either, because that's something that there's a lot of nuances to and rules that a lay person wouldn't know.
Right.
So then for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you have to qualify, and it's a plan to kind of help you to discharge the debts that that individual has. Versus Chapter 13 is where obviously you also have to qualify, but it's a certain amount of income that they can afford to repay a portion of their debts, is what you're saying, right? The difference between them.
So Chapter 7, if someone came into my office and they said they wanted to file bankruptcy, what I'd have to look at is first their income, right, to determine whether or not they can qualify or what chapter they need to file. The other thing you look at is whether or not they have assets that are exempt or unexempt. So if someone comes into my office and they tell me they have a home and they don't want to lose their home, right? I first have to look to see what the value of that home is. What's the mortgage on that home and whether or not there's equity in the house.
Right.
And then now you get into the nuances of the exemption. Well, how long have you had this home for? Because if it's been under 3.3 years, you only get 180,000 in equity exemption. Whereas if you're over the 3.3 year threshold, then that exemption goes up to 330 to 600 in some cases.
Wow.
So that's a huge difference, right? And if you go into an attorney's office who doesn't know that rule and they file your case at the 3-year mark, and your property is equity is over that amount,
Right.
now you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would have waited a few more months or another year, you would have gotten that full exemption. So those are kind of some of the things that we look at when someone comes into the office to make sure that we plan this correctly and we file correctly. That allows you to keep your property and not have to surrender your assets to a bankruptcy estate and have your assets sold.
Wow.
Real quick, when you mention about qualification, it triggers a thought because I think it's not just me applying for attorney on, please help me apply for bankruptcy. Go
Right.
ahead and my debt's all going to be gone because my income is low or whatnot. Isn't there like a window of time that the judge or the court will look back and say, hey, how long have you incurred this debt? Did you try to strategize and incur all this debt recently, and all of a sudden now you want to qualify for bankruptcy? Does that make sense?
Yeah. There's a good faith rule, right? If you're using your credit cards and maxing out your cards right before bankruptcy, that's not something that you want to do. That's frowned upon by the court. And there's a good faith rule that says that if you do something like that, then that debt could possibly be non-dischargeable.
Right.
What the creditors would do is, if they look at your statement and right before the bankruptcy, you went out and purchased a TV or made payments on your car using a credit card.
Right.
They'll file an objection with the court for non-dischargeability, and then you'll have to
These
come
are the
in.
creditors.
Right. You'll have to come in and you'll have to try to defend that. And a lot of times if you use your credit card without the intent of paying, that's the good faith rule, then that debt is not dischargeable
Right.
by the court.
The point is we've seen that happen before, and so this game to what helps that. Right?
That's a really good
It doesn't
point.
happen. A lot of the people that come to my office, they're not that. They're not trying to abuse the system and max out their credit cards like that. But there are people like that, and you're not going to
Yeah.
stop that. That's just things that happen.
That's a really good point, because I could imagine I could have just do bankruptcy and just restart my whole, life or credit or whatever, review my financial planning again, and then they just abuse that system, be like, oh, it's okay, I'll just max my credit card and
Yeah, there are people who abuse the system, but the court does prosecute people for bankruptcy abuse. You see it happening with people either hiding assets, not reporting things. But you don't want to go down that path. That's a federal offense, so it's
Wow.
not something you want to get caught doing.
So, Luxian, there's a question that a lot of people would wonder before they, get on board with trying to do a bankruptcy. Is bankruptcy, once they usually is going to be on their credit report, right? And when they do, how long would that last? And then what is the step, or how long would it be to rebuild their credit again?
Right, so if you file bankruptcy, regardless of whether it's dismissed or if you go through with the process and get the discharge, it'll show up on your credit report for 10 years.
Wow.
That doesn't necessarily mean that your credit is ruined for 10 years.
Right.
It just depends on how you rebuild your credit after the bankruptcy, right? If you want to rebuild your credit, you're going to have to reapply for credit cards. A lot of people will go and get a secured credit card and rebuild their credit the same way they did before, right? Spend a little and then pay it off at the end of each month. If you go get a car loan, make that car loan. After that car loan's paid off, they'll automatically see their credit go up again, because your credit score is a debt to income ratio, right? Once you file bankruptcy, if all your debts are wiped off and you have income, your credit score is going to automatically increase.
Right.
Wow.
Whereas some people, they will sit and not pay their credit for years, and their credit their credit score won't increase. But even though they didn't file bankruptcy, you
Right.
can't increase your credit if you have that debt laying on your credit score. X amount of zero, or however long it takes you to pay.
Right.
Wow.
So when someone comes into my office, I also ask them, when they're still trying to decide whether or not they should file bankruptcy, I ask them, well, do you think you're going to be able to pay this debt off in about 2 to 3 years, right? Because if you are, maybe you can avoid bankruptcy, but if you can't, then consider bankruptcy, because you could basically file a Chapter 7, be complete with the Chapter 7 in 3 to 4 years, and then at that point rebuild your credit and start over and probably build your credit like within a year or two, depending on your income and how well you're able to rebuild.
It's crazy because, obviously we have mutual clients.
Right.
And some of my clients said, man, I literally filed bankruptcy last month, and then this month I got a bunch of credit card offers.
Yeah.
And I was like, how's that possible?
That's true.
Because now it makes sense because now your debt is zero.
Right.
These guys are saying, hey, these guys are fresh, fresh and clean. He doesn't have any liabilities.
Right.
Let's start, getting them to apply for our credit cards.
Yeah. And they know you can't file bankruptcy in a few years, right?
You just brought up a great point. When I'm thinking of bankruptcy, and again, consistent with we talked about a couple of episodes ago how COVID changed the way we have to do things now, right? If it hasn't triggered where you change the way you live and your perspective on life, then nothing will, right? And part of it is like, okay, let's get our community, our people, and our life in order. Get it back on in a way where we feel like, man, you know what,
for the future.
Get a consultation with an attorney to get worried about the law and legal stuff. Get your taxes done correctly. Just making sure that all the little things are done. Just because we don't have that second chance, as much as you think it will come again, right? And so when I think of bankruptcy and I think of the system, and frankly, our community has been here for 40 years, and I think we've come a long way, but we're still kind of lacking in terms of knowledge, and finance, banking, and legal. But I think of like Donald Trump, right? 5 bankruptcies of his businesses, but just personally, he's still successful.
Right.
So I'm thinking like, okay, well, wait a minute here. You can file bankruptcy for your businesses, but still it doesn't affect you on your personal level.
Right.
Can you talk about that, Oksana, about the difference between business bankruptcy and personal bankruptcy, how they're different?
Yeah, well, when you're filing a business, a lot of people, when they file business bankruptcy, they either have an LLC or a corporation, right? Someone like Donald Trump, if he has an LLC or a corporation, all his debts are with the LLC or corporation. He's not personally guaranteeing any of these debts because they're giving his company credit, not him.
Right.
For us smaller people, that's probably not possible. It's not realistic because if you have an LLC and you go out to get a loan, they're most likely going to have you sign as a guarantor on that loan. And if that's the case, you even if you file business bankruptcy, they can come after you personally.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah, unless you have a business or a corporation LLC that's been established and you can get credit, then you can kind of separate the two liabilities. But until then, and if you're still signing that guarantee, there's no way around.
Right.
Yeah, no way we're gonna get.
Obviously, your office can provide services for both personal and business.
Right.
And if you're not sure, obviously reach out and
get a consultation.
Yeah.
I mean, figure out whether or not you can separate the two, and figure out what you'll need to apply. Some people, they come into my office and they have a business and they personally guarantee this debt. They have to file both the business and themselves to discharge on both sides.
Wow.
But with businesses, you can also reorganize, right? Chapter 13s. Or if you have a bigger business, Chapter 11, which most people think. That's a reorganization. You're trying to negotiate with creditors, propose a plan that'll either pay them less or extend the terms of the plan to try to keep your business operating and try to work through the financial hardship and come out operating again.
Right.
Wow.
I hate to talk about pricing and and all that, which we don't right? But just in general, generally speaking, if somebody says, "Hey, I need to see you," I'm sure is there a consultation fee and also the filing fee? What are some of the range that you can maybe give them an estimate?
Yeah, if you're filing a Chapter 7, you're probably looking at a range depending on the case, where most people attorneys will charge you between $1,000 and $2,000 for a basic case. If you're having other issues in the case, if there's tax issues, if there's foreclosure issues, if you have student loans and you want to try to discharge student loans, which falls under a very special category and it's very hard, then of course some attorneys will charge you more. And then during the bankruptcy process, depending on what you do, you have to file certain motions. If you want to operate a business, you have to file a motion to abandon the property. So certain things will make the case cost a little more, but in a typical case where you look at it and it's a clear case, you could expect to pay about anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 for attorney's fees. And then the filing fee is at $338 right now for Chapter 7. And Chapter 13, it's a little more expensive because Chapter 13's now you're doing a 3 to 5 year plan. So the attorney's managing your case from 3 to 5 years, right?
Wow.
So Chapter 13's in the Eastern District, which is Sacramento, Vacaville, Modesto, Stockton. It goes all the way down to Fresno. We're considered the Eastern District of California. There's a no-look fee, meaning you can charge a flat fee of $4,000, or some attorneys will opt out of that no-look and they'll charge, based by the hour, and then they'll apply for the court for payments for that. So it's anywhere around $4,000 for the Chapter 13, but a lot of attorneys will also allow you to, make a payment installment. So what they do is they'll take maybe $2,000 up front and then allow you to pay $2,000 through the plan. So your fees are basically treated as if you're a creditor and you get paid. If your case is dismissed, of course, your attorney never sees that $2,000. But if you go on with the plan, then they get their payment.
Right. No, as a creditor, I got my name put on the schedule on a bankruptcy sometimes. So it's frustrating because for a fact that, I'm sure people are struggling. They want to reach out to their attorney and use whatever resources available to fight bankruptcy. But there are people who owe us money, right?
Right.
I don't think myself as a typical creditor, but just the fact that you have invoices out there and you see a letter from an attorney that says, hey, you are one of those creditors.
Yeah.
It trips me out. The one, I can't hate on that because I think he uses the strategy that allows him to do that.
Right.
But until man, you're really going to cheat your accountant. Man, I'm not going to pick up the phone the next time you call me for anything else.
That's bad, right? Yeah. If anybody owes you money, they're required to list you on their list of creditors. And what that does is the court sends you notices, right, that you're included in this bankruptcy. If it's a Chapter 7, most likely you're not going to get anything if you're an unsecured creditor, because if they get a discharge, it wipes out all unsecured debts.
Right.
In a Chapter 13, you may be able to get some sort of payment, right, but it depends on their plan, what they're proposing. When you're proposing a plan, it could be anywhere from 0% to 100% to unsecured creditors.
Right.
But what you have to do as a creditor is now you have to file a claim with the court to be paid. Because if you don't file a claim, you're not going to get paid.
And you know how to pay an attorney fee to do that claim. But I obviously, appreciate the time. I mean, it's such a wealth of knowledge and information today. But I'm curious, if you can share with the audience, your experience with court now, because I know in the past you had to go. I mean, I know I still see you going to court, now and again. But how has COVID changed in terms of I know that there's some client that comes in here. You guys are doing Zoom and all that. Is that how things are filed now?
Yeah, the courts are still not back to where they were pre-pandemic. Depending on the courthouse, some houses have made clients. Defendants in the criminal court systems are required to appear in court now. There's no more Zoom appearances.
Right.
Bankruptcy, now they give you an option to appear via Zoom, in person, or telephonically. With bankruptcy 341 hearings, and that's the one hearing that you have to appear as a bankruptcy filer, those are still being conducted either over Zoom or telephonically.
And they can do it at your office.
Right. But the court system, in other courthouses like the civil courthouses, I know they're backed up a lot right now with an influx of cases because they were closed down for a while during the pandemic, and I think a lot of people just all started filing cases all at once as soon as they opened. And I also do landlord-tenant, as you know, and that's one of the courthouses where I've seen the most change because evictions are supposed to be summary proceedings, right? Meaning they are supposed to be quick.
Right.
They used to take about 2 to 3 months, for a typical case. Now we're seeing the court take about 2 to 3 months just to get your filing back.
Wow.
So the last case I did, it took about 5 to 6 months.
Wow.
And it was a default case where we didn't even go to court.
Right.
And I think that's going to be even a little longer now. I think it's going to stretch out to maybe 6-7 months, and who knows how long in the future.
Wow. Well, other than bankruptcy and tenant and landlord, what other services can you provide for the community?
Yeah, so I specialize in bankruptcy. We also do personal injuries, so car accidents, of course landlord-tenant issues, and then I deal with a lot of contract issues, contract reviews, some real estate transactions and stuff like that. And we also do civil litigation, disputes between people and lawsuits and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, with the attorney being here,
Right.
he's on the clock. So every minute, every hour is
counts.
50 an hour. So definitely appreciate your time.
Yep.
Thank you for having me.
And I know we have a couple more episodes coming up with some other area that you mentioned earlier. I think I'm really curious about the eviction and even just like personal injuries and things of that nature, because it's been a hot topic, and I feel like more information, more knowledge like today makes like a community even better in terms of being more empowered, more just knowledgeable in terms of how to prepare and protect themselves.
Exactly.
Using the law within allowable. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so make sure you're getting your advice from someone who has some credential, who knows what they're talking about, right? Because I get people coming into my office telling me all the time, well, this person told me this person told me that. Well, what are they? How did they get their information, right?
The credibility.
So just be careful and get your information from someone who has knowledge.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today again, Antito and Luxuan. Thank you, viewers, for joining us on this episode of Team Chinya Coffee Talk. As always, if you have any other questionnaire, or even if you have any suggestion for our next episode, please visit our oursalonmoms.com website and fill out a questionnaire, or just contact us, and then we'll be right with you in the next episode. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.